CAI. Welcome. Hi, Nathan.
Hello, thank you. Appreciate the introduction. So welcome everybody. So glad to have you here. Harry and I are super excited to present CAI's Operational Readiness Framework. Now, we've scheduled this to be about 45 minutes, so we do plan to leave time for a Q&A. So as mentioned in the prologue here, please consider your questions and put them in the Q&A box. And we'd like to have a little discussion at the end. All right, we'll get rolling here. I did want to highlight a couple aspects about us. So I am Nathan Temple, I've been with CAI for 22 years, and I'm also currently the chair of ISPE's Commissioning and Qualification Community of Practice Steering Committee. And why do I highlight that? Well, there's a couple of really timely initiatives in play right now. First of all, I was co-author on ASTM E2500 update that was released in March. So make sure if you haven't seen that, seek that out, because it does integrate some best practices. And then here in a month or two, we'll be releasing an addendum or supplement to ISP Baseline Guide Volume 5. This is about a 25-page document that integrates lessons learned, implementation methods, best practices, and it folds in some of the concepts of quality risk management and some of the recent regulatory updates. I'll tie that in to a future topic here in a few minutes. But this is all in alignment with enhanced project delivery.
And I'm Harry Benson, and I'm excited to be here as well. I'm focused on the people, the processes, and work streams and procedures it takes to operate. Operational readiness is the pre-work that you do to make sure that stuff works right on day one. And that's why I'm passionate about the topic.
All right, so we covered learning objectives when you registered for this presentation, and I thank you for doing so and for the responses to the questions. That was helpful. Again, thank you. Here's our agenda today. While you're looking at that, I'd like you to reflect back on a past project, or perhaps you're in the middle of a project now. Certainly, we all have projects coming up in the future. And imagine a launch day, a day one, where everything works. Not just the equipment, but the people, the systems, and your decision-making process, right? A future where compliance isn't a scramble and our throughput or our goals are met from batch one. So this isn't a fantasy. What I'm describing is operational readiness done right. So today, Harry and I are going to share CAI's framework for operational readiness that'll help you build that reality, a faster, safer, and more sustainable startup into operations. Let me give you a little bit more about what we mean when it comes to operational readiness, because those words are kind of out there. You may have operational readiness initiatives at your facility or within your company. To us, operational readiness is the point at which a facility, its systems, and its people are fully prepared to begin operations. So again, that's safely, efficiently, and in control. This is where readiness is not just about meeting a startup date. It's about ensuring that the project, the organization, your teams can reliably produce intended output on day one, on time and on budget. So why do we struggle with this so much? Why do we have projects that can't accomplish this? Even with clear project milestones, such as mechanical completion or system turnover, many projects and many organizations struggle with fragmented readiness. And that's an important term, fragmented readiness. So our functions, our teams, our work streams, they end up operating in silos. Critical schedule impacting project decisions are deferred or misaligned. And our training systems and procedures lag the physical plant process. What does that result in? Delayed startups, inefficient ramp-ups, and reactive firefighting. Sometimes we continue to fight these battles for months after we go live. We've rung the bell, we state that we're into operations.
So imagine also that you cross this chasm that we see in time and time again in project, where you have set the objective of the capital project as an operational measurable goal. That's how you bridge this chasm. To move from project mode to run mode, that handover is always a challenge when you don't have the end operational metrics in mind. If the goal is really speed to patient, then full scale intended operations day one is going to get you there faster and is going to get more product more efficiently out to the market. That requires early planning, integrated scheduling, and again, the project charter to go beyond construction and equipment completion, but actually into measurable runtime objectives.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the need for change before we get into some more definition around the operational readiness model. So a few points here. It's been clear throughout industry, if you've attended ISP or PDA events, if you've heard the regulators speak, that we as an industry have an issue with patient shortages, with delayed release to market. So we can't keep doing things the way we've done in the past. And so when I talk about operational readiness, when Harry and I discuss this framework, it's really about enhanced project delivery and doing things better. Why do I say that? Because it aligns with some of the initiatives that we have in industry right now. This right here you may have seen is ISP's Pharma 4.0 model. And I wanted to show you this because it really aligns with our perspective within this framework of early proactive action, of aligning various efforts and work streams early, right? The concept of digital tools empowering decision-making. So I wanted to acknowledge this model, but also think about what I mentioned with ASTME 2500. In that updated standard, we talk about system ownership, so the people part. We integrate ISP Q9, Rev 1, ICH Q10, also Annex 11, Annex 15 updates. And all of those are starting to head in the same direction. And maybe you've seen this. It's the direction of aligning product, and therefore what happens to the patient, to our process, reducing variability, demonstrating control. And so this is all stitching together with proactive early effort that's rooted in quality risk management. So what do we kind of see when we're talking about this need for change? Where are we now? We think looking at across multiple projects, a lot of experience with delayed projects, talking with industry, working within the ISPE, C&Q community practice and other communities, we're seeing about an average 25% delay on projects. And Harry's going to kind of take us through this a little bit.
Yeah, to highlight a few of the points here, and I'm sure many of you have dealt with much of these delays or causes of delay. But if you really start at the beginning, the project charter itself, the budget, the objective even, often ignores the handover, ignores the actual readiness to operate day one, largely because often financial models budget things in capital or operational budgets. We understand that. Not ignoring that, just being proactive in setting the objectives of project success in an operational sense. More on that in a little bit. But when you don't do that, what you find is you've got to go back to the well and look for more funding or more resources or extended time to get to that fully operational state. And then the goalposts are changing. Why is that? Because often the goal itself isn't defined. Poor scope definition. And when I say scope, I mean project as a whole. Alignment of all the key stakeholders and everybody within is really key. And we're going to talk about that in our framework as far as how you do that. And optimistic scheduling, right? Again, if the project charter was set without the inputs of those who know what's going to cause delay, then it's likely going to be wrong. And in today's labor market, it's no small task to, within that time frame, hire or find, hire, and train and qualify the people you need to perform the work, including the expertise and experience you need at that level. So, and what that really leads to is one of two scenarios or somewhere in between, right? We call it the tale of two startups. On the left, you see startup has been delayed and you don't hit there in day one or even year one as far as productivity and output and release of product to market and patient. On the other hand, on the right-hand side in green, you see a nice, clean, crisp startup on time consistent, sustainable output to intent. Now, that may seem dreamy, but let's look at why those things occur and how you get closer to that green curve. What's happening on the left in the gray shaded part behind are a bunch of issues, things that happen just prior, during, and after startup that cause the delay and the limitations to productivity and output. We know what those are. In fact, I'd like to challenge everyone here for a minute. We have a lot of people on this webinar, a lot of experience. If all of you were to be in a room to plan a project, I want you to imagine how many of those issues we would have identified through a working session if we set our goal properly and say, hey, what's going to bite us? You go around the room of those who on this call, I guarantee, absolutely guarantee, we would be able to identify and have an action plan for 90% of those issues that cause that problem. So then it's just about taking the action properly. And we'll talk about the framework for doing so. What we want to do is do that very thing and then treat all those issues as risks. In parallel with the construction project and the capital project, we run an operational readiness project. That'll get us closer to the green curve, and we have fewer issues during and after startup. In hitting that approach, we identify what's possible. I'll take it so far as if you do this early enough, if you have the right people aligned to perform the tasks that we just discussed, granted it won't be everybody on this call, but you have experience and experts that you can draw from. Bring them together early, and you can have a well-informed board or executive team and finance who's setting the budgets and the timelines for the capital project so that it's more appropriate and realistic. Then we have that aligned leadership team, which then leads to a fully aligned team. That team builds out a milestone schedule, action plans, especially action plans around the identified risks that are prioritized and staged appropriately. And finally, we know who to bring on, when, and for what roles, because we've thought this through with the experience in the room.
Okay, we've given you some background. We've talked about the need for change. We've linked this to kind of what's going on in industry and some regulation. So here's my tongue-in-cheek slide. Are you ready for the good stuff? Right? What we're going to do now is we're going to get into our 6 pillars of operation and that empower operational readiness. But before that, this is actionable and built on the bones of real projects. So when I say, and I'm going to give you a minute to read this here 1 second. When I talk about operational readiness, when CAI talks about operational readiness, it's the top of the pyramid. And at that top is operational readiness. What does that mean? Enhanced project delivery. That means speed to market, speed to patient, product to patient. That means the facility, the systems, the automation, the people, everything, all this huge amount of effort that we're putting in at the project level, at the CapEx level, realizes its operational goals and moves cleanly into operational excellence or operations, OpEx, day one. So we submit to you that these 6 pillars support that goal, overall goal of enhanced project delivery and operational readiness. And I would ask you, and I'll pause here for a second, to kind of read through each of these 6 pillars, reflect a little bit, and then we're going to break down each of the 6 into more detail. And after that, we're going to take you on our journey of how to progress and implement these. So take a minute, see if you identify with past projects or maybe current projects, some of your pain points. And this is also a good time to think about some questions you might have and type them into chat. Keep in mind, each pillar represents a strategic area where capability must be built and aligned to deliver on operational readiness. So we will push ahead here and talk about strategy leadership, the first pillar.
So strategy leadership, what we're saying is leading the strategy. Starts with a clear vision. We talked about it earlier. The charter itself of the project needs to be appropriate and realistic. Realistic in the objective, realistic in the time frame, and the resourcing and budgeting to attain that. When you have that and you are fully aligned at all the way to the top and everyone in between, you have inspired and engaged leadership, which then leads to inspired teams. That leads to functional alignment and everybody pitching in to do their part and that's just a better operating culture. When we talk about aligning, one of the things that we really emphasize is this concept of plant the flag. Let's not be ambiguous about, hey, we want to get to the finish line. Let's get this capital project done. That's not sufficient. What is it we're trying to achieve? Let's all go into a room and figure this out. When I say all of us, those people that are leading the project across functions, right, across departments, et cetera, and you agree, you align on, you debate and discuss exactly what it is that measures success. In this case, this is a real case. This site decided that second product approval was their current state of finish line, the planted flag, and they would build the milestones accordingly. Their original was an approved product, but then they recognized this is a multi-product environment. Let's call second approval as our proof positive that we've made it, because we're already producing the first and we can turn around the second product. I might argue that even a better planted flag might be the actual capacity output and maybe even cost per unit. Something to think about. But in any case, once the decision's made, we align on it. Now we can build our milestone and our timelines and the actions downstream of it. But that requires investment. We understand, and they already acknowledged the different budgets of capital project versus operational. But if you think of it this way, why would we invest in operational budget type stuff that prepares for operations early and even earlier than we might think we need to? What's the rationale to do that? Well, here's some simple math, right? If we look at the two curves and we get closer to that blue curve, in this case, that nice, consistent, steady output with an on-time startup, that represents more batches out the door, more product to patients that has value. So if you do the simple math, what was the investment for this particular decision for early investment? In this case, the example is bringing on system owners or experts a year in advance. Okay, great. That has a cost to it. That's the numerator. The denominator is the value per batch or value per run or whatever, however you measure that. Use your numbers, but you can see that if that investment actually impacts the startup time and accelerates and avoids delays and gets more product out to market and patients, then the value equation makes sense. Moving on to there, once you've set that objective and you have aligned teams, you do need to build out what your project plan is and then execute it. Execution excellence is obviously a pillar of any project, but this isn't just standard project management. Not that that's an easy task itself. We need to get away from checklists, massive spreadsheets with dozens of people in a room looking at every item for hours. That is not going to get you there. That's a fail. What you need to do is have rigor with someone like an operational readiness project manager who knows how to execute well and knows how to do so in an integrated environment across all departments and work streams. That individual works with those SMEs and leaders, subject matter experts and leaders, to drive excellence with rigor, cadence, if you will. What I mean by cadence, well, getting away from that massive meeting of spreadsheets and checklists, we do 15-minute check-in meetings, stand-up meetings, we call them, right? Dashboards like this. This is just a simple example, but you take each area and the value is what's performed between the meetings, not during the meetings. The meetings should be about where am I yellow, where am I red, what help do you need, where do I foresee bottlenecks, where do I see challenges and risks. We've already vetted most of those out with the previous efforts, but now we have to do this in an ongoing way. That's an example of execution elements. There's more to it, but that's a great place to start. Next pillar is the workforce itself. We know there's challenges in the workforce. Experts, experienced, even GMP operations technicians, lab analysts, et cetera, are not on the tree ready for you to pluck. We see that. We recognize that. Get ahead of the workforce you need early, way early. Make the decisions using your processes in every department, map those out, and turn it into a staffing plan. The earlier you do this, the better. And here's why. First of all, it's going to take a lot of time to find the talent, then hire it, and onboard and train and qualify them for their roles. But stepping back, just the effort of mapping the process to task, procedures, and training and qualification and batch records and workflows takes time. Getting that right way ahead of time is best. The other reason, besides just the on-ramp time, the other reason is this informs that well-informed board or executive team who's setting the resourcing plan. If you do this right, and we have seen this, as Nathan said, this is built on the bones of real projects. When you do this, going and telling executives and the board who I need, how many people I need in every role ahead of time, and planning for that operational budget makes sense. And it avoids the sticker shock that might come afterwards if you didn't do that. And you may not get the staff you want, and you'll fail. The other piece is the expertise. Now, we're big advocates. You heard Nathan mention this with the ISP changes as well and guidance. The system owner concept. The system owner, and think back, either past projects or past sites or where you are right now. My guess is for those critical systems, those key systems to operational success, you probably know who knows that system or equipment best in your plant. You probably know who that person is. It might be worth considering having them be your system owner. They don't even have to be an engineer. What they have to be is knowledgeable about what it's going to take to get that next project up and running with that system, and the people able to operate that system. They know better how to set the user requirements, go through the testing phases, and support those testing phases of supporting vendors and engineers all the way through maintenance and reliability strategies. They also, on the top of that diagram, know best how to break down the work and the processes and build out procedures, SOPs, work instructions, and batch records, as well as the training and qualification program for people to actually be successful in operating, which then leads us to the next pillar.
Yeah, so equipment and facility readiness. So this is kind of bread and butter for most people, right? This is what we're used to, the process and the systems. But this pillar is really a focus on the physical backbone. So our utilities, our systems, and equipment must be qualified and aligned with the process, right? That's our process, and then we link to the product using quality risk management. We ensure our assets are not only installed and commissioned, but also reliable and maintainable. We align facility turnover with training, SOP readiness, and risk mitigation. There's that connection to system owner that Harry's talking about. And we connect asset readiness to lifecycle performance, not just startup. And I love this. We put the statement here: a facility isn't ready when the lights turn on. It's ready when it performs in sync with the process. So there's a lot to unpack here, right? We know about all of these bullet points under here, but we have to do them. It has to be proactive and early. So let's talk about some of the methods we've seen to be successful. So I'd like to start off with one of the key items for success here, we think, is project kickoff. So project initiation. And you're going to have several of these, right? This isn't just commissioning and qualification and validation. It's also the quality team and their focus, asset management and reliability, your non-GMP building envelope, building commissioning, its coordination with vendors and trades. And we've kind of broken this up into two areas just to discuss quickly. We have project controls alignment. So that's about scope management, some of those execution excellence. features that Harry talked about, looping back with governance and risk to project delivery register and tracking. And on the right-hand side, system readiness. So what is our plan? How are we connecting the process to the product? How are we implementing risk assessments throughout the project lifecycle? And really taking advantage as much as we can with the good work that vendors do, the fact we have commercial off-the-shelf equipment, but also being aware that there is complexity even with simple systems, especially around automation. So these are some of the approaches we've seen effective on projects, and it's key to the planning process and going across all these pillars that you'll see when we get into our implementation approach here soon. So just a couple fun facts here. This is based on ISPE collected survey data and also our own project experience. This is focused on the cost of commissioning and qualification. But when you really unpack it, it's about project delivery, right? Because C&Q is sometimes, or maybe typically, on the critical path, and we're getting asked questions of why. So on the left-hand column, this is just kind of to provide some context. How many years has this particular client, owner, company, facility, team had quality risk management and what some call risk-based approaches in place? But look at the schedule savings. Months, 25% schedule savings on the C&Q phase. So that's what early project planning and the use of some of these tools can provide. Now, as we step into our fifth of 6 pillars, digital and data enablement, this is, of course, about computer system validation and getting the automation connected and the infrastructure in place, but it's more, right? Readiness in this context isn't just software going live. It's about delivering usable data to the right people at the right time. That's really what data integrity is, right? Sure, we have compliance that we need to do, but that's what we need, usable data to the right people at the right time. So we're aligning our manufacturing execution system, our LIMS, our ERP, our CMMS systems with operational workflows. Easy to say, but often left to the end. How are we aligning with operational workflows? We're going to build digital dashboards, readiness KPIs as part of the execution excellence phase, predictive insights, and knowledge and continuity. Automation and digital tools should be empowering decision-making. So without digital readiness, execution slows, decisions lag, and risk increases. And we'd also lose some of our capability to optimize and provide continuous improvement. Now, this is a little bit busy. I'm going to go over 2 quick things that we're doing and we've seen done effectively. The concept of digital twin and spatial AI. So this is in play. It's only going to get better over time. So we're talking about doing a scan maybe once a week, and you can get construction status. You can start early conflict modeling and resolution with the BIM, right, with your BIM model. You can even do preliminary slope checks. You can do component verification. Are the components in the right order or the right orientation? And then another cool thing that we're seeing is, what if you have a subject matter expert in Switzerland and your facility is being built in Raleigh? And I have glasses on, right? And my operator, my startup team, my C&Q team, my system owner, perhaps is in the field, and I have the SME in Switzerland telling him, not that valve, this valve. Show me the flow indication. Okay, I think the problem here is this. Go over here and do that. That's the kind of stuff we see. And so that's only going to get more advanced and something you should consider. And also, everybody's talking about AI. So we need to be a little bit careful, because AI is not just by itself the super silver bullet that everybody kind of hopes it is. So check your statements when people are talking about AI. It should be human in the loop empowerment. And so we're starting to see some development with knowledge graphs. So this is bigger than a ChatGPT or large language model. This is aggregating a lot of data with context. It's not easy, right? You don't just do it. This takes SMEs, experts, and quite a bit of time to get set up. But once you have it, you have something powerful. We're seeing drastic reduction in protocol generation time using some of these tools. Think of having a couple thousands of electronic turnover package in this system with context, where you can query it and say, give me all the maybe discrete inputs, all my loop testing type information I need, all my IO points, and it tells you where it found it, gives you the data, you can back check it, but we're not sifting through mountains of data. We're getting information that we can use quickly. Okay, that was a teaser there. Quality, while last in this presentation, is not intended as just a bolt-on to our 5 pillars. It's not do all this great stuff, and oh, by the way, quality is along for the ride, because quality is always there, and quality usually lasts. No, quite the opposite. And we use the word advancement, quality advancement, extremely intentionally, because quality is a partner that guides readiness and seeks excellence. And so why do I use the word advancement in particular? Because it should be phase appropriate, and our quality teams and methods and plans for the project need to be aligned with current regulations and best practices. We continue to see projects where previous methods and expectations are impeding operational readiness and the ability of teams to deliver. Now, I am in no way saying that the quality team needs to do less or they're not doing a good job, but there are changes in regulations, the use of quality risk management, new approaches out there that we have to recognize and take advantage of, because the regulators and best in industry approaches are helping us deliver higher quality, but also better schedule outcomes. So as we transition now, you've seen our 6 pillars. We've broken down the element of each one of the pillars. We're now going to take you through a journey. Here we go from methodology and actual implementation. We're going to cover 3 phases. We're going to talk about how to define and move forward specifically for project mode, for project run mode.
So starting with phase 1, which is discover and define, it's really, as we've said several times, you set the vision first. What are we trying to do here? Expansion, greenfield or brownfield project, what have you, a new tech transfer. Okay, great. Let's assess where we are. So the green items are indicators of where you might need help. Right? So assess where you are, and that'll help you build your roadmap for what you're trying to achieve. Once you've done that, you can bring in key leaders and SMEs that have been through the ringer before, the folks that know those risks, those issues that are going to bite you and keep you from scheduling on time and full capacity, and bring them to risks, right? Bring a few of those people on board, get them to vet the vision and align on an end goal, right? That's the flag that's planted. If you see that last green item, we're referring to, the planted flag that represents the operational readiness goal, which then moves us into phase 2. Again, I would challenge you to imagine that room full of people from this that are attending this webinar, giving you those inputs and aligning, debating, and saying, that's our goal. Okay, we're clear. That's measurable outcome for the operation, not the capital project, but the operation. Now we're ready to do a detailed, what we call workshop, right? Working session with all of those key people and some key SMEs, typically about 2 days. This is, again, built on the bones of real projects, and the successful ones give it the focused time. Bolt the door, cell phones not allowed. Okay, I'm going a little extreme, but no distraction. Focused team, and their charter is to build out what's going to take to hit that planted flag. All right. So the first thing they do is in that workshop is they build out all those 3 things in that center green item. Working from the bottom up, they build out a project roadmap. That's timeline to the flag, the milestones, and then all of the activities, systems, processes, and plans that need to be put into place across the different work streams, right, in an integrated way. And that's important because we need everyone to be on board with what are the dependencies. I need this long-range plan before I can have this drug product plan, before I can move forward on the equipment specifications and the facility parameters and the process parameters. Great, we put all that together, and that's one part of the roadmap. Then we build in quality and IT and supply chain and operations, manufacturing, and so forth, labs. That's the project roadmap. That project roadmap is kind of a level 1 to 2, maybe, project schedule. More on that in a minute. The other 2, working up from that center green column, is a risk register. We actually create a project, operational readiness project risk register, and we have the team independently and then collectively prioritize those using a ranking system, right? Once you've done that, you have clear priorities of what are the risks that are going to bite us. Now let's make sure we have action and ownership to mitigate those risks before startup. And then finally, a talent gap evaluation. This is where you got to be real. It hurts sometimes, hurts some egos sometimes to admit that I don't have the expertise in this particular part of the process or system, or I don't have the bandwidth to do all the things that need to be done. Once you've got through that, that's the output of the workshop. Now we dive in and create a full level 5 integrated schedule across all the workshops, work streams. That gives us that integrated plan and schedule this takes on the role of the operational readiness project manager, who should have been involved all along in the workshop, of course.
Yeah, so I wanted to cover some actual examples here and talk a little bit more, do a little storytelling. So Harry and I will go back and forth on this a little bit. So the operational readiness workshop, Harry gave you kind of a sneak preview of that and broke it down. Very powerful. And we've done a lot of these, and it's one of those where teams come together. They, like you said, they need to be willing to be open because it's about project success. And we're all going to get promoted and get bonuses if we can deliver on this project. So hiding within your work streams and pretending like things are going to be okay is not a recipe for success. And it's pretty amazing to see these workshops unfold and people open up and the risks come down. But let me start with a story about planting the flag. It's one of Harry's favorite examples. I'm stealing from him. You mentioned planting the flag. What is the goal? So we're all in the room. We say, well, we need to get this project done. It can take 1 to 2 hours to get alignment on what the goal is. And I've been in several workshops where finally the person in charge, the site head, let's say, stands up, says, everybody stop. This is the goal. It's this many vials per batch or per period of time by this date. And then that clears it up. Everybody's like, oh, well, that's going to be hard to do. Right. And in one example, that goal was set. The site head set the goal. The construction management firm, the general contractors there, the key stakeholders. And then we looked at the schedule, which had been set. Because remember, our construction schedule, our startup schedule, perhaps even our C&Q schedule is typically well contextualized. It's everything else. It's everything else that has to get done, which has to get done by the owner, the client, the team who's sitting there, right? But the GC looks up and says, well, that's not attainable. Like, that's not possible with the permitting and the construction. So what happened? One, somebody was directed to leave the room immediately and start making phone calls for long procurement lead items. Literally go, you, Nathan, leave now and go order equipment. They left the meeting and they started ordering equipment. 2, we redesigned the suite strategy for the cell and gene therapy plan, right? So we basically said, okay, suite A is going to come up. It's not suite A, B, and C. What did that change? It changed the HVAC. The people process waste flows just got changed, right? And so now the GC team, they're in the back, they're shooting people out the door because now they need to go work on some of the new planning to get new cost estimates. So real impact. Another example is when we looked at the schedule and we were doing our workshop and we were putting down what's going to happen when, we had 6 automation go lives, but the IT, OT automation team was not in the room. So we turned that into a win because, the answer was, well, that's corporate. Corporate IT is going to handle this. Well, are they? Is that one person? Is that a team who can actually deploy and help you? So then we get those people in the room and we start planning that out. We need a digital strategy. And if you do this early enough, this is recoverable, right? And if you go back to that digital pillar, even if we're using commercial off the shelf or vendor supplied controllers, automation on board with the skids, we still have to eventually connect that up if we want to do maybe an electronic batch report, Pi Historian, LIMS. And we've seen multiple projects where we get to that point and we're like, uh-oh, we didn't get the right stuff. And then maybe even we decide we can't go EBR now. Or maybe we make an informed decision at the point of this OR workshop and decide we're not going EBR because it's too hard. Let's focus on this because we have a goal to meet. And the goal isn't all the fancy digital tools we need. The goal is into operations at a certain quantity and quality, right? So we change that plan. Harry, any other strong examples you want to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, similar examples, just briefly, we've seen risks around definition of the product goal, meaning, okay, is it this type of product or is it this type of product? I'm trying to be intentionally unspecific, so as not to be disclosing anything. But those are challenges. Those decisions need to be made as to what we're going to call the goal. And that changes in that meeting and gets defined so that everybody's rowing the same direction. And another case where, the roadmap was built, everybody was starting to make progress on all the plans and tasks that needed to get done. And someone in the back in the supply chain side said, just so you guys all know, the stoppers that we specified are 3 years out. Okay, well, there's another case. Someone go chase down alternative suppliers, et cetera, right? Had that meeting not been had at that moment, we would have learned later and it would have caused more problems. A common risk, which leads us into the next part, is documentation. Documentation, development, review, and approval by technically experienced people, SMEs, et cetera, and by experienced quality is not to be taken lightly. We know the amount of time that takes and the Herculean effort. Make that a project unto itself. We see best practices where either supplemental staff bridges the gap until appropriate experienced staff is hired, and its own project plan within the OR project. We have a documentation project and its own PM, its own schedule, et cetera, that everybody's on board with in an integrated way for good documentation workflows. Best practice, definitely. And which leads us to talent, right? Don't sell yourself short by saying, hey, the 3 people we have in QA, they'll just bulldog this and get it done. Okay, caution. Probably not a good strategy, right? They'll just work 50 hours a day. No, that's not going to work. So let's make sure we've properly staffed our people for the project as well as operations, right? To keep people from burnout or multitasking that does not work. Right? Procedures, we already mentioned that. Another one is operations. So we talked about the system owners, critical role, but even others, lead supervisors, lead operators, lead technicians in maintenance, lead, senior lab analysts, et cetera. Bring them in earlier. Again, rationalize it with that exercise I showed you, the math, right? But when you get them involved, at a minimum, you get operators at a minimum involved in the testing phase, right? Ideally, much earlier. But at a minimum, you get those senior operators involved in the testing phase. Your bridge will not be half built when the construction and equipment project is done. It'll be complete, and you'll be spanning more easily over into operations. And then finally, project coordination. Can't say enough about the role of an OR project manager, operational readiness project manager, working in parallel and in tandem with the construction management and capital project management.
All right. So before I jump into phase 3, start thinking about your questions if you have any, because we're getting close here to covering all of our topics. So we talked about phase 1 and phase 2. We spent a lot of time on the concept of an operational readiness workshop. And when we conclude phase 2 and step into phase 3, which is the project execution mode, we should have with us a detailed level 5 schedule as an input. Remember, we had the risk to project delivery register and the talent gaps out of phase 2 from the OR workshop. We should have been working on that throughout that period. But we're going to continue those efforts and to execute and integrate. Here's where the operational readiness project manager should come on board. And Harry's mentioned that this is somebody who is different, a distinct, separate role from your overall project manager. We still, of course, need the project manager to do schedule, budget, communication, work with the trades and the vendors, GC, and all the work streams. An operational readiness PM can be a part-time to full-time role, depending on what part they're brought in, and they are specifically focused on the talent gaps and the risks to project delivery, to maintain the dashboards that we showed in execution excellence around our status and who's working on what. So we're working with the work streams. After that OR workshop, we're going to break off into their individual paths and do additional detailed planning. And we're going to utilize those in this phase. So here you can see we set up the KPI tracking and the dashboards, and we start implementing that. We're going to have, when we get into our startup and our integrated operations, which is the key, right? I mean, we can do all the vendor SAT and IOQ and the standalone system commissioning qualification, but we need to get to the point where the equipment and the automation are married together and the individual systems are integrated. And then we start looping back. You can see that feedback loop of the lessons learned, the topics, driving issues to completion. And this should not be a phase that's overly painful. I'm not going to say it's going to be perfect, but if we've done what we're supposed to do in phase 2 and early phase 3, we've set up the systems. Remember execution excellence with Harry's talking about this is more than traditional project management and the things we always do. We're setting up issue management, deviation management, how quality is involved. So we're prepared and ready to communicate and get through the integrated portion of phase 3. And then boom, on the right, operational readiness achieved. What does that mean? We've met our goal. Now, maybe it's the first goal, first product, but we still have other things to do, right? We're trying to get to, now we get the second product in, we're getting our cleaning for multi-product. That's phase 3 where we can find success with operational readiness. Now, we're not going to go through detail in phase 4 and phase 5. What that is talking about is now we start shifting this from maybe your first time of really doing this in the full 3-step phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 model. Now we start deploying this across the full site, the next projects. If you have more tech transfers, the next shutdown, if you're at a site doing periodic shutdowns and maintenance, or a multi-site, we just start deploying it at scale. This means we're going to have to get organizationally a little bit more mature with additional personnel and people, our systems, our rollouts, our training. And then phase 5, that's where we get better at doing this across the board at the program level. So continuous improvement, KPIs, metrics. So we get better and better with the rigor of this operational readiness framework across your full organization. Okay, I just want to touch quickly on maturity levels. So if we transition back to the pillar thought, each one of those pillars and your various teams and work streams fit into those pillars, one or more, right? You can assess maturity. This was in phase 1. When we're kicking this whole journey off, we need to understand where we are. And we think you need to be integrated, level 3, to have maximum probability of success at delivering enhanced projects, of reaching operational readiness. You mentioned in my beginning, my motivational statement, that a lot of projects, teams, work streams are fragmented. This is when we all kind of do our own thing and we rely on heroes, on those that have been there and done that are willing to sacrifice probably everything almost to bring this project across the finish line. So at level 3, we have the systems in place, the methodologies. We're focusing on executing processes, a system for delivering projects, not on survival mode. So I will leave you with this slide, the CAI operational readiness framework. This model is more than an operational readiness workshop. It's various phases. It's assessing maturity at each one of your teams and pillar level. It's deploying this model for alignment. It's focused on action. We're empowering individuals to take ownership. And ownership means being able to raise your hand and say, here's where I need help in order to be successful, right? And it's about risk. Risk, of course, at the product and patient level, using best-in-class approaches, but also risk at the project delivery level. So it's not about, this OR model we're talking about is not about checking boxes. It's about building a controlled capability across the entire organization. It's about alignment. So now we no longer have to imagine the future I talked about in the beginning. We can create it with this operational readiness framework. Thank you for your attention. Please, if you have any questions, we'd love to have them now. And thanks for investing some of your time today to think about enhanced project delivery.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. I'm going to pop back on. Thank you both for that wonderful presentation, for all that great information. Just a reminder to the audience, if you want to submit a question to our speakers and have not, you can do so right now. But I'm going to bring both speakers back on, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to look to our audience questions. And that first question is asking, how are sites maintaining project momentum after these workshops, given the other site work? Who can help with this one?
Yeah, in our experience, what we're seeing is the people that are succeeding post workshop have senior leadership saying, okay, asking that very question that you just asked. In fact, we just had that happen just a couple months ago on a workshop, in a post workshop briefing. Both the site head and later the executive who dialed in to see what was going on asked the question, what's going to stop us from reverting back to our old ways after this workshop is over? Great question. And the answer really is that full alignment and that team strategy needs to take the goal that came out of the workshop, which is your risk register and talent plan, and build small bursts of action plans with ownership around each of those, and then have the overarching operational readiness project manager who takes the integrated project and keeps it moving in the right direction at all times. That's my answer, and it is working. Nathan, anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's, we set the plan and we get that commitment. And like you said, it's the strategy alignment pillar.
Yeah.
The senior leader, and we've had the CEO there, the site head, the global director of project delivery, who's like, we're doing this. Like, I want to report after this meeting, and I want the dashboard. Doesn't have to be hard, but we're gonna do this.
Okay, very good. Thank you both. Back to the audience questions. This next question from Peter is asking, can you downscale this to a single product startup? How about this question?
Yeah, I would say that this kind of goes in alignment with, well, when's the right time to have an operational readiness workshop? This is a perfect fit for an individual project. That's what we were kind of highlighting on with the phase 1, 2, and 3. So having that 1.5 to 2 day operational readiness workshop, have it as soon as you can. Maybe it's a 1 day because we're early on, we barely have the design, but we need to kind of map out some of the challenges and get some actionable data and schedule to the board for decision making, some initial cost analysis. It could be super early. Maybe there's already equipment on site and the team is in 12-hour-a-day mode, and they're in that hero mode, and everybody's working really hard. There's no debate there. But if we had a 1 to 2 day, I would even say we stop for 1 to 2 days. How dramatic is that, right? There's never time to stop and replan and re-baseline the schedule and identify risks to us being able to meet the date, to confirm what the goal is, and then have an honest conversation of it's physically not possible. So what are we going to change in order to minimize the impact of that goal, right? How often do we go 3, 6, 9 months over schedule with a willingness to not take the time to reassess? So maybe I'm going too deep. You got me excited. This is a passionate question here. Yes, you can apply it to us.
I will add too, we have absolutely applied the workshop and journey approach to single product rollouts, right? Single tech transfers, single product launches, and expansions of a line. They're smaller projects than an entire massive greenfield for multi-product. So you just make everything appropriate to the complexity, right? But the model still absolutely works. How much of that product, plant that flag, how much of that product should we be producing per unit time at what per unit cost? And that's a good measurable objective. By what time frame, right? And absolutely, the same rigor might require fewer individuals, right? Might have fewer risks, but you still could follow the same model. And we have.
Okay. Very good. Thank you both. Thank you, gentlemen. Back to the audience questions. This question is asking, how is this model different from a mature project management methodology? How about this one?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the project management maturity method, is quite similar in the sense that, we use all the best tools and practices for effective project management. That's, to me, that's the entering argument. You have to have that for starters, right? You have to be skilled or have people who are skilled in good project management methodologies, right? So in that sense, it's just a specific application of those models, right? And this model, this framework in particular, applies directly to our industry using those PMI and so forth best practices, right? But it applies. What's different about it is the integration, the multifaceted integration that comes with our particular industry. And the reason we created the framework in the first place is because we saw that it wasn't being done. There was project management rigor out there, no question. That's not the argument. What wasn't happening is applying it with the end goal toward operational output, not just project completion as measured by scope, budget, and time frame, right? It also wasn't accounting for the multiple players, work streams, we call them, departments, who weren't always invited early enough. Nathan used the example of IT and OT, supply chain not being at the table, labs not being at the table, EH&S, environmental health and safety, not being at the table. That is unfortunately not common. Even process sometimes isn't brought in early enough because we're focused on the equipment and facility, right? So that's what's different about our framework, is we account for all those lessons learned from the past.
I think it's also about honesty. That's a word that kind of struck my mind. Or maybe it's openness and alignment, getting people together early and documenting the things that might be in the back of their mind of, I don't know if that's achievable. I don't have the people to do that. I don't have the talent or the bandwidth. I'm already on 2 projects and you want me 10% on this project. Who's going to own this? And that gets revealed with this focused operation workshop. Is it a PMI, good project management methodology across the board for communication and alignment and tools and tracking? Yeah, I can see your point there.
Okay, very good. Thank you both. I think we have time for one more question. That question is asking, what are the biggest challenges the life sciences industry need to overcome to achieve operational readiness? Last thoughts?
I'll start with one. I've mentioned it once and I'm not going to belabor the point, is looking at operational capital budgets and operational budgets entirely separately with different people, and not thinking about the bridge as a continuum with the goal of operational output for that asset, for that site. That's a miss. We see the bridge half built time and time again when this kind of discipline and method is not used. Nathan, your thoughts?
I think it's the I think we overthink project delivery. I think we're over focused on systems and standard ways of doing requirement definition, and we have to do it this way, and we focus our energy on getting things done that don't get us to systems that integrate and actually produce at the level they need to at the time they do. How many times have we done, quote unquote, all the right things, but then we have manufacturing after handover say, well, this doesn't do what I needed to do. Go back and change recipes and phases, and I can't maintain the equipment. And why is that? And what's different now? I think what's different now is a lot of regulatory input through Q9 R1, through ISPE and PDA guidance and best practices, and a real focus on what's the product and the patient, what's the process. Even if it's easy stuff, a lot of commercial off-the-shelf equipment, vendor supplied, I still have a process. What's the variability within that process? And demonstrate to me, the regulator, ourselves, the company, the patient, or ultimately the ability to produce at scale, demonstrate to me that you can control variables at the process level to give me the product I need. And when I say control variables, I'm talking about this concept of a manufacturing process control strategy. which, by the way, we define in the ISPE supplement that's coming out soon, based on Guide 5. And a manufacturing process control strategy, this is another passion topic for me, is the data integrity, the risk to critical process parameters, systems integrating. It brings in the people side. And that's what gives us higher assurance by chasing down and mitigating risks early, that we can deliver what the actual facility needs to accomplish at the end. I think that's the biggest risk.
Maybe as opposed to treating all activities with an equal level of risk and rigor. Yeah, understood. I agree with that.
Right. So how are we applying our critical SME system ownerships and quality professionals to the best effect?
Okay, well, that is our time for today. I just want to step in and thank you so much to Harry Benson and Nathan Temple for sharing their time and their knowledge, and to the audience for watching. We will see you next time on Pharmaceutical Online. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.